The president is facing blowback this morning when it comes to how they handled the Chinese surveillance balloon that was shot down on Saturday. That is coming from Republicans. Some Democrats are defending him, as Jim Himes just did on CNN earlier this morning. To talk more about this, we're going to have the former national security advisor under the Biden administration, John Bolton, here. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for being here. I think the first question is, do you believe that they should have shot down this balloon sooner?
Yes, absolutely. When it was first sighted near Alaska on the 28th of January, according to press reports, NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, apparently decided it was not threatening. I'd like to know how they know. The payload for this balloon was apparently the size of 3 buses. That's pretty big. Were we confident there was not a nuclear weapon in that payload? Were we confident it wasn't carrying biological weapons, pathogens, or toxins that could have been dumped into a reservoir or spread across croplands? Why were they so sure? And then 2 days later, they did determine it was an intelligence threat and didn't do anything about it, and didn't tell the President of the United States until 3 days after the first contact, which I find incredible.
So you have questions about that because it was first detected January 28th. It was January 31st that the Defense Department alerted President Biden. That's when he asked for those options about potentially shooting it down. You think he should have been told the day it was detected?
Well, I think much sooner. I mean, there's a lot we don't know here, and I think the wording of many of the statements by administration spokesmen is sloppy. And when the wording is sloppy, that often means the underlying story is sloppy. But that's a significant delay in my view, and I'd like to know the explanation. I'd also like to know where in the chain of command, from that first sighting, the first detection of the balloon, how far up did it go, where did it stop, and why did it stop?
The argument is that shooting it down over water was the safest option, because what we've heard from officials is that they believed it could have caused damage to people. It could have hurt people, to buildings. It could have hurt people if they had shot it down while it was over Montana or Idaho, for example. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, I think we obviously have to be concerned about the safety of our citizens. How would their safety be affected if there were weapons on that thing, that we didn't act when it was timely to do so? And with all due respect to the great citizens of Alaska and Montana, it's less populated than here at home. We've had bomb shelters before. People can be prepared for this. The government can pay compensation for property damage. There are a lot of things that just are unanswered about what the government do. But there's another possibility here, too. We've talked about this as if shooting it down means destroying it. Back in the day, before there was electronic transmission of photographs from space, we used to dump film that our satellites had taken into canisters that came back to Earth and that were caught by airplanes. Now, I don't know the technology, if we still have it or if we've junked it, or if it was possible here. But, as the saying goes, where there's a will, there's a way. Capturing that payload is going to be very important. Whatever we can get off the bottom of the sea, if there were some other way to have brought it down more slowly, resulting in less destruction, so we could have proven this was Chinese intelligence gathering or whatever is in that payload, we should have taken a closer look at.
The other thing we heard from the Pentagon right after this happened last week as we were monitoring it was that this actually happened before, when your boss, or your former boss, former President Trump, was in office. We're now learning from a senior administration official who says those previous occurrences were discovered after the Trump administration left office. I think you, as National Security Advisor, can you answer, how did a Chinese spy balloon get into U.S. airspace and someone like you was not told, someone like former President Trump was not told, the former Pentagon chief, Mark Esper, said he was not told about any of this? How did that happen?
Well, as far as I know, every Trump administration official who's been asked has said they didn't know anything about it. I will say this, if there was any actual knowledge that these balloons were over the United States and higher authority wasn't told, that's a serious problem. That's a serious problem. That's not what the Biden administration is saying. I wrote these words down. I was so stunned by them. One official told Fox News that the balloons went undetected, and then said, 2 things can be true at once. This happened and it wasn't detected. Well, if it wasn't detected when it happened, how did we detect it more recently? Did the Biden administration invent a time machine? What is the basis of this new detection? Now, I understand that the administration has offered to brief former national security
Yeah.
officials from the Trump administration. They haven't called me. I'm not waiting by the phone for it, although I'd take the briefing if they offered it. I think Congress has got a lot of questions here. This was a botched effort from the beginning. And by the way, the fact that there were earlier transits of part of the United States territory, which I think the administration made public to say it's nothing new, don't worry about it, proves exactly the opposite. The very fact, if it is a fact, that the Chinese have tried this before should have alerted us and should have caused us to take action before the balloon crossed into American sovereign territory.
Well, notable that you said you do want that briefing. And Ambassador Bolton, while I have you here, I want to ask you about what I mentioned earlier, which is these new polls that we're seeing from the ABC and Washington Post on 2024, where it says few Americans are excited about a Trump-Biden rematch. I know you've toyed with the idea of running for office. Have you made a decision on whether or not you're running for president in 2024?
I have not, but I would say whether I run or not, I do think national security is going to be a much more important issue in 2024 than in recent elections. And if this Chinese balloon incident proves anything, it's that the people of the United States need to hear more from candidates what their foreign policy views are. These are life and death decisions that presidents make, and I know it's not been the source of a lot of popular discussion in recent campaigns. That's a mistake for the country. The candidates need to talk about national security much, much more.
Do you think Trump has a good message on national security?
Trump doesn't have any message on national security other than that he would be perfect. Perfect phone conversations, perfect decisions on the balloon, perfect decisions to solve the Russia-Ukraine war. It's all about Donald Trump. It's not about foreign policy.
Former Ambassador John Bolton, thank you for that perspective this morning.